Well, hey guys, and welcome back. So many parents are asking so many fantastic questions. Last week, Aidan and I put out a video talking about, earlier in the week, we put a video talking about the fact that children still have the right to go to school and that parents should ask for IEP meetings in the event they feel like virtual learning is not working and their children needs more accommodations. If you haven't watched that video, just click right up there and it'll be there for you. Now we wanted to talk about a topic that a lot of parents are asking about, and that's what questions are best to ask at an IEP meeting. So Aidan, if you don't already know him, he's amazing. He's an education advocate. He's an autism self-advocate and one of the coolest and kindest people I know. So he came on here today to share what he thinks are the top 3 questions that you should ask at an IEP meeting.
So thank you for that. The first thing that you really have to ask when you're at an IEP meeting regarding your child is what exactly is he classified as, or what. So really what it is that a classification basically is a thing that's put where it describes exactly what your child has a disability in. So there's many different types of classifications. Depending on your jurisdiction, there could be more, there could be less, but some of the main ones that you might see are autistic, autism, emotionally disturbed, or SLD, specific learning disability. There's a lot of different types. Multiply disabled is another one. There's a lot of different types of classifications. And in order to have your child receive a specific type of classification, you first have to go through a series of tests. So the school has we'll do an educational or psychological test, whatever it may be, to kind of determine where your child may be struggling, where there might be strengths or weaknesses, whatever it might be. And based on those results, they will have the ability to come up with certain characteristics as to what possibly your child could be classified as. So the first step is obviously getting your child tested. It's a whole big process, and I posted what exactly the process is of getting your child to receive special education services on my website. You can go to www.secacommunity.com. But the big thing is asking the case manager or somebody that's really kind of running the meeting exactly what is my child classified as. And that's important for 2 reasons. One being that it sets the tone for the meeting in that you're able to understand kind of the context as to what you'll be talking about, as well as understanding what types of accommodations or sometimes even modifications will be implemented in the child's IEP as a result of him being diagnosed or classified with something. And the other important piece of it would be specifically to ensure that you as a parent know exactly what's going on with your child, right? So the school says, my child's autistic, and you don't even know that your child's autistic. That's why important positive communication it's something that's very important. So being able to constantly communicate and understanding exactly what your child has is something that's vital to be successful.
Awesome, thank you. So we have question number 1 is to ask, what is your child's classification?
Yes. What is your child's classification? That's the number 1. And
so what is number 2 question?
Yeah. All right. So the second one that I think is very, very, very important to really recognize during the IEP is it may seem like it's common sense or it's a no-brainer, but sometimes at IEP meetings, things get so stressful. Sometimes it can be very emotional, heated, whatever it may be. But the big thing that you want to check in with is how exactly is my child doing in XYZ classes? How's my child doing in math? How's my child doing in science? It's important for, it's always good at any type of meeting where you're interfacing with the school to have the teachers present. Sometimes, depending on the jurisdiction where you live, the rules may vary and certain things may vary, but it's always good to have a decision maker, somebody that can give you a yes or no answer as to what is actually happening or what is going to be decided upon with my child at the meeting. So that usually takes in the form of a case manager or director of special services, something like that. But having teachers there is equally as important because you're able to specifically garner what it is that your child may be doing really well with and really may be struggling with. So ask, how are they doing academically? Are things moving a little bit too fast? Are things a little bit too slow? revisiting exactly how he's doing academically. And another thing to really make sure of is, and I'll go to that. That's the third question that is the third thing to really look into. But one thing that you really want to also be really cognizant of is ensuring that your child is socially, emotionally doing well. This is a misconception, and a lot of times schools seem to think that they don't really have a lot of responsibility on this end. But IEPs also cover social and emotional learning as well as academic programming. Asking your teachers, the case manager, how is he feeling? Is he depressed? Is there some type of feelings that's being displayed? How's he doing making friends? That is equally, maybe even in some ways, more important as well as ensuring that he's doing well academically, because you can't have a child do well academically and not fail socially and emotionally. It's unacceptable. And so you just have to always ask as to whether or not he's doing well socially and emotionally as well as academically.
Yeah, so those are great questions, right? So we have number one is, what is my child's classification? Number two, how is my child actually doing in school? A lot of parents do forget to ask that. And what is your third best
The
question?
final one, and this, I was alluding to this a little bit, this is the most important aspect, I think. One of the most important aspects. These are all important, but this is a really big one. It is, what exactly are the accommodations or modifications that are in my child's IEP? In other words, that's the question that's basically saying to them, what are you exactly doing? Like, what is different from a generalized student? Because with generalized students, we don't have an IEP for them. IEPs are for students that are classified, or sometimes 504 plans who are not classified, whatever it may be. You are trying, by asking that question, you're figuring out what's different. What are they implementing? What are they doing to assist your child in gaining a better type of education and being more successful? So just to quickly say this in the most simple form, there's two types of things that are commonly implemented. There's accommodations and then there's modifications. Now, accommodations are typically seen in a generalized classroom where, or in a special education classroom, if your child was already, sometimes it can be used as accommodations within a special education classroom, but really you'll generally see the word accommodations within a generalized education classroom. There's a rule where we try to do the least restrictive environment. So in other words, if a child sometimes has issues with hearing certain things, or has a hearing processing disorder and may need you to repeat that, that doesn't mean that that child should be placed in a self-contained special needs classroom. So the rule is least restrictive environment. So your child, let's say, is in a generalized environment. The accommodations could be that those are things that don't necessarily mean, those are little extra ways to help your child. It doesn't mean that they can do the curriculum or they can be within that particular environment, but there might be a few other things to add on into that particular program. So for example, let's say you have a child that's taking 6th grade history and he's in a generalized environment, but let's say your child sometimes gets a little bit overwhelmed and a little bit stressed. An accommodation that could be put into the IEP is frequent breaks. Now, that doesn't mean that because he needs frequent breaks or because he gets too stressed, he needs to be put all the way, he needs to do an out-of-district placement, or there needs to be this whole big thing or whatever. That's an accommodation. You're accommodating his needs by being within his curriculum as well as ensuring that he's able to be successful. Now, the other side to it is modification. So sometimes you might have a kid, and this is really a lot of times very commonly where I try to fight for, which is modifications, where you have a child that specifically is, let's say, in a generalized environment and every step of the way is struggling socially and emotionally. They're not feeling good about everything. They can't keep up and everything like that. And some districts, unfortunately, will say they're fine and they don't want to, go to the extra mile in ensuring that. And I'm not saying every district does that, but it's unfortunately sometimes they do. And a modification is when you specifically modify their schedule. So what that kind of means is that, let's say your child was in a regular or generalized science class, struggling with the concept, doesn't understand what's going on socially, emotionally, everything is like a problem. Modifying that, rather than accommodating, you have to modify that and say, all right, this isn't working out, so let's do something else. So putting him in a classroom where there's a co-teacher, where there's a special education co-teacher and a generalized teacher, modifying where he might be in a completely special education classroom for science. That's called a modification, where you are vastly changing the curriculum where it wouldn't work to just have accommodations. So it's very important for you as a parent to really check in with the case manager and the people that are really supporting your child as to what exactly you're doing. And you know, asking your child, how have things been going? Asking your child, asking the school can help you be informed to making decisions for your child at a certain point, and saying to them, you know, I think that, you know, I think he's good where he is, or, you know what, my child is really struggling. I'd like to possibly discuss different types of educational programming. Being in constant communication, really understanding where your child is at, is vital to ensuring that your child is receiving the best possible education that he could be getting.
Yeah, that's really great advice. So I love that. So the top 3 questions you're going to ask are, number 1, what is my child's classification? Number 2, how is my child doing in school? And 3, what are your specific accommodations and modifications to the child's IEP? My best advice for parents is actually, and I think Aidan would agree with this, not to always sign the IEP at the meeting. A lot of times the school district, you'll have a conflict you don't really necessarily agree what's in it. The school district will hand you the IEP and say, like, sign it. Once you sign it, it's a contract, it's a legal document. I always tell parents, look, if you have any questions at all about the IEP, you know, even in a meeting, sometimes things can kind of just get swept under the table or misunderstood. I actually always tell parents, never ever sign an IEP at an IEP meeting. Take it home with you, read through it at home when you're not as an emotional state. Once you're like 100% clear, read every single word and make sure you agree with everything in there before it's signed. Sometimes schools just kind of slip stuff in there that they don't necessarily share. And sign it, you agree to it, and it's harder to change. You can always have a new IEP meeting, but once you agree that something is an appropriate education, the school, then you have the burden of proof of proving that you agreed that this was appropriate and now it's not appropriate, it's not working. You have that burden of proof as a parent to prove that it's not actually working. So I always tell parents, make sure you take that IEP home, and if you have a behaviorist, you have an education advocate, you have even just a friend down the road who has a child who's special needs, who maybe is like 3 or 4 years older than yours, who've been through this process a few more times, have them look at it. Make sure you have a second set of eyes before you sign it and agree to that. Aidan, would you agree with that advice?
I couldn't agree with you more, Jess. I think that that's so important. And 99% of the time, you really shouldn't be signing anything because things are too stressful. You need time to really review this. This is your child, and certain things, you know, might come about that you didn't expect at the meeting. So, you know, one thing that I would recommend is if you're not really familiar with the system, and a lot of people aren't, and that's not a problem. If you can, bring somebody that is familiar with IEP meetings and this type of thing. You do not have to go through this alone. You can bring in an advocate or bring somebody there to help you kind of guide you through this meetings and break it down for you, because sometimes it's a little bit stressful.
Yeah, that's awesome advice, Aidan. So I really hope this video helps you when you go into your IEP meeting. You know, make sure you're prepared. It's important to know this. These are things a lot of parents don't know, but things that you really do need to know. So if you found this video helpful, share it with your friends, like and subscribe to this channel. And if you haven't already heard, Aidan and I put a book out together called This is Autism. It's stories of 8 autistic adults sharing what it's like to live with autism, and we'd love to have you check it out. Head over to Amazon and get your book. We will be more than happy to answer any questions you have about it. So if you have any questions, just reach out to me. My name is Jessica Leichtweisz. I'm the CEO of Hope Education Services. You could reach me at my email or at my website, hopeeducationservices.com, by email. And if you have a question, I'll make a video to answer it.